Hi there, this is the first video in the unit of work on development, and today we're going to be looking at the nature of development, and I'm hoping to explain to you what the nature of development is. So by the end of the video you should be able to explain what development is and explain the nature of development. We've got some keywords here: development, developing, developed, monoculture, subsistence farming and inequity, and that's what I'm going to be explaining throughout the video. So looking at the syllabus, this is what we're going to be covering: the nature of development, and then the use of development indicators to look at spatial variations, issues arising from these spatial patterns, and then equity issues. So we're looking today at that first dot point about the nature of development. So this is what we're hoping to learn about in this unit of work: explore the underlying factors that give rise to global inequity, explain the differentiating livable standards across the world, and explore the forces that contribute to different types and rates of development. So let's get started by looking at that word about inequity. Basically, that means the lack of fairness or justice, and I've got this infogram from oxfam.com.au, and it looks at and it basically summarises what the biggest problem is. The world's 62 richest people own the same wealth as the 3.6 billion poorest people. It's really important to look at that and understand that there's a real unevenness of wealth around the world, and that's heavily linked to development. So that's what we're going to be looking at today and throughout this unit of work. So development, what does that mean? Well, the term development is used when a country with a large population lives in relatively poverty, which tries to reach to describe condition or improvement in conditions in these countries. And I've got a good infogram there showing people without electricity, and hopefully that explains to you what development is. Here we can see like a bigger version. We can look at the countries that the percentage of people without electricity, and you can see it's still very high. And when we're talking about development, we're looking at ways in which these countries can progress. And one development indicator which we'll look at next lesson is people with access to electricity. So that's what we're really looking at. The problem with this term development, the term is very hotly contested. There's around 700 academic definitions. A lot to do with development. It's all to do with economic growth and industrialisation. They're the key ones that we look at, where we look at GDP, which is gross domestic product, or gross national product, and that's basically showing the wealth of a country. However, we do realise, there's no such thing anymore as first world, second world, or third world. That term was to do with politics, and that simply doesn't exist as much anymore. The world has become a lot complicated places, and we have the terms developed and developing, rich and poor, but again, that's not so easy, because wealth isn't distributed evenly in these countries, in regions, as we'll see next lesson when we start looking at development indicators. But basically what we do look at for developing nations, we do see traditional farming methods, as you can see in this picture. This is what we mean by that. And we have what's called subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is just using, just making enough food to feed yourself and your family, and a small amount that you might sell to market to make a little bit of profit. And it's monoculture as well, so it's just one crop, which can be a bit of an issue when you rely on that crop for your income, and you might get a bad year, you might get a bad crop, there might be a natural disaster, or the price of that crop falls, therefore you're not going to get that wealth. So that's what we mean by monoculture and subsistence farming. That's two of the key words that I was talking about at the start of the lesson. So make sure you've got in your Cornell notes a good understanding of what that means. And also within developing nations, there is a high level of people living in absolute poverty. So basically, the nature of development is difficult to define. There are lots of different sort of definitions. Any definition you should include a process of change that results in improvement in quality of life, any change of focus and reduction of the absolute poverty. So that's really important, and you've got to remember that development is all about progression, and it's not just to do with money, access to education, social improvement as well. So that's really, really important. So what I want you to do now, that's the end of this very quick lesson about what sort of development is. What I want you to do after I've finished talking here is just to answer these questions in your book and make sure you've written complete sentences as well. If you feel like copying the question into your notes first, feel free. It's not 100%. So hopefully I've explained what development is and explained to you the nature of development as well. Okay, thanks, Year 11, doing a great job. Thanks.